guys. Welcome back to Sit Down with Sid Podcast. This is episode number 33. Our guest today is the founder and creative director behind The Wandering Mind, which is a mental health podcast and soon to be the merchandise store. After struggling her entire life with mental health and suffering from anxiety, depression, and ADHD, in 2019, she founded and started this podcast. She wanted to share her story and let others know that they were and are not the only ones who struggle with mental health problems. Her belief is that it is possible to learn on how to navigate through one's mental health struggles and live their very best lives. Without further ado, it's an honor for me to present to you all Emily Elizabeth. Hi, Emily. How's it going?
Hello. Wonderful introduction. Thank you. It's going wonderful. How are you?
I am doing great. First of all, thanks so much from our side for giving us this opportunity to have you with us and share your story with us, and the audience.
Absolutely. It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Perfect. So, Emily, before we kind of dive into the main subject of the podcast, would you mind unpacking to our audience a little bit about your background, where you grew, and so forth?
Yeah. So my background, I was born in Washington, D.C., and I migrated over to Louisville, Kentucky, of all places. And I've been here for most of my life. And this is where I've done the most growing and learning and evolving. And this is where I started the podcast. And it's a wonderful city. There's a lot of progression here over the last couple of years, which I'm really proud of. And we're doing a lot. I've started to get involved with the mental health scene here as well. So we're trying to move forward with that also. But yeah, I operate a mental health podcast called The Wandering Mind. And it's my passion. I love it so much.
Perfect. That's awesome. So let me ask you, I mean, as I mentioned in the intro also, that you almost struggled entire life with anxiety, depression. When did you start experiencing these symptoms, and was there anything specific that you believe it led to these things?
So for me, I noticed changes or something was off or that I was different from all of my friends as early as elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
I think the ADHD was super prominent from the very beginning, and the older I got, the more I kind of recognized that there were difficulties and hurdles there, specifically with school. So studies were really difficult for me. Math was specifically something that was really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And I would look at my friends and it just seemed to come so naturally and so easy to them, and certain things within school and concentrating and absorbing information. And I learn differently, but the school systems that I was placed in were not set up to help everyone, because it's a very one size fits all. So I think from the very beginning, that was something that I knew right from day one was something that was off. And
Mm-hmm.
because mental health wasn't spoken of at that point, I didn't know what was going on. And it was really challenging because I just wanted to feel quote unquote normal. And I was having all of these struggles and these frustrations throughout my early childhood, and I just didn't seem to understand why.
So let me ask you now, if you were going through all of that, who did you seek help? Like, who did you tell? Did you go to your parents? And give us a little bit kind of background on that as well.
So I didn't really have to tell anyone because I'm a very emotional being. So the struggles were right there in the forefront. So my parents could see that, something was going on. I would be sitting there with my dad. He helped me with my homework a lot. And I would have these meltdowns over things that most kids probably wouldn't have a meltdown over. They would take a break, they would come back, they'd try to figure it out. And I just had these big blowout meltdowns. And so they were like, okay, something's going on, not to mention, additional aspects to my behavior that were kind of changing and evolving, and they just didn't seem to understand why. So I give props to my parents at the time because they actually reached out and sought out a psychiatrist, which I feel like most families I don't know, I can't speak for everyone, but I feel like it wasn't very common to do something like that at that point. This was like the very early 2000s. And they did. And I actually was diagnosed with ADHD at a very young age. But because of where I was at, because of the stigma surrounding that diagnosis at the time, the types of medication they were putting people on, I didn't take it seriously. And I completely disregarded the fact that that was what was going on. So I basically just told them, like, no, I don't have that. I'm fine. I'm normal. Safe to say they put me on medication for a little bit, and due to the side effects, they ended up taking me off of it. And then they just kind of let things be, because at that point, I think the side effects scared them.
What do you
And
mind sharing with us? What were some of the side effects, if that's okay?
honestly, I don't remember. And
Okay,
they didn't really tell me. I think it had a lot to do with probably my appetite, mood changes,
got
because I
it.
know with ADHD medication, a lot of them are appetite suppressants.
Hmm.
And so when you're so young, I think I was like 10 or 11. I mean, I was young.
Wow.
You know, you don't want any of that to be tampered with. And it's just difficult to find that balance of putting your child on this medication you know absolutely nothing about. There's a whole lot of stigma surrounding ADHD, depression, anxiety, mental health in general. So I think they just freaked out a little bit and were just like, you know what? We'll figure this out on our own.
Hmm.
So that's what they did. And that's, yeah, just kind of
So,
had to
so,
roll with it.
so let me ask you now, when you were going through all of this in such a young age, how did it impacted living with yourself, your relationships and habits with family, friends, etc.?
Oh, that's a good question, because it impacted everything, especially my relationships, especially relationships with my parents,
Mm-hmm.
because I was going through so much and I didn't know how to express my feelings clearly or properly or in a healthy way at all. I was just emotional. I would have outbursts, I would shut down, tons of anxiety, panic attacks, indecisiveness. I mean, this was like a constant trend throughout my life for years, probably until my junior year of high school, when things started to sort of evolve and go to a better place. But yeah, it was really tough growing up with ADHD and depression and anxiety while trying to quote unquote fit in and be normal with the people that I
Mm-hmm.
was around, while also maintaining, my grades and trying to like live my life just as being an adolescent. It was really difficult. And having two parents who wanted to provide and wanted to help and support, but didn't know how, it just kind of added fuel to the fire.
So how was your I mean, once again, at such a young age, you have your classmates and everything. I mean, was it easy for you to fit in the kind of mix with them, or did they notice something was off? Like, give me your perception on, like, what was going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had a really great group of friends. Um, at the time all of this was going on. And again, I think we were so young, no one was focusing on
Mm-hmm.
that, on I don't think they were able to pick up on stuff like that. I think everyone was so focused on their growth and their lives that, I was able to fit in socially just fine. It kind of came to the point though where I started to set aside what I wanted to do and just kind of followed the crowd. And I think that might have been for fear of, I don't know, just being seen as different.
Mm-hmm.
And so for a long time, for many, many years, that's kind of what I did. I just did what everyone else did. I just kind of went with the flow and fit in as best I could just to feel some type of normalcy. But in hindsight, it only created additional anxiety and depression because I wasn't living in my truth. But at that age, I think it's just so hard to do something like that, to I
Yeah,
don't know.
because
It
sometimes you're
was
not even aware of what you're doing at that age. So, I mean,
exactly.
uh, so then you told us that back in high school, junior year, you started getting, like, things started falling in good place. So give us a flashback of, once you got off this treatment due to the side effects, How did things started falling place in a good place?
Well, I say good place lightly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it shifted is what I should have said. So,
Mm-hmm.
sophomore year, something fairly traumatic happened where a relationship that I was in ended pretty traumatically and drastically,
Mm-hmm.
which then kind of kicked off the next phase of my mental health journey, which was drinking. I think it was sophomore year of high school when everything kind of erupted in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to feel things that I had never felt. And again, with the person that I am, I feel everything so strongly. And again, at that time, I didn't know how to process what was
Mm-hmm.
happening.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to follow in the lead of the people that I was hanging out with at the time, who are actually still my best friends, and we've grown
Mm-hmm.
together and evolved since then. But everyone kind of just started drinking at that point in high school.
Mm-hmm.
That's when the parties started to happen. That's when everyone just started kind of experimenting. So it was kind of odd timing because that's when I was kind of at my wit's end due to
Mm-hmm.
everything that was going on. And emotionally, I just couldn't handle it. So I
Mm-hmm.
decided to hop into that realm and try out drinking and see what it was like and how fun it was and how it made me feel. And from that point on, rather than having a ton of emotional outbursts, I kind of just coped with alcohol instead and utilized that to heighten my social skills and just kind of numb away the things that I was feeling.
So is it fair to say that the alcohol was a suppressant of your symptoms?
Oh, yeah. It did not help. I thought it did, because again, I was fitting in, I was doing all the things everyone else was doing, but it just prolonged the healing process and it prolonged me actually sitting with myself and thinking about, what was actually going on and how I was not allowing myself to process any of it. So, yeah, it was definitely a suppressant.
Did it take you to a dark spot in life? That's my question. Like,
Sure. So the alcohol itself, I would say no. The way that I utilized it to cope ended up taking me to a dark places. Again, because utilizing the alcohol and not recognizing that I was using it for as a coping mechanism
mm-hmm.
just further shoved everything that I was feeling under the rug. So I never had a moment where alcohol was like the cause of it. It was just a part of that process. I wasn't the type of it wasn't the type of thing that I was like drinking every single day per se. I
Mm-hmm.
was just using that as a way to forget. Um, and I just utilized it for far too long. So
Okay.
yes and no, kind of. If you
Okay. So tell me now, looking at yourself now, how have things evolved and where are you now, uh, emotionally, mentally, physically in this space?
I am a completely different individual when it comes to my mental health. I think,
Mm-hmm.
yes, I still struggle. I still have all kinds of hurdles I still have to overcome, but the way that I go about doing so is completely different. I think it's in part due to, I think, the isolation in
Mm-hmm.
2020 where we had to quarantine. I think that had a lot to do with it because I
Mm-hmm.
finally was faced with everything kind of all at once and I had no escape. I had to sit
Mm-hmm.
and think about it, or I allowed myself rather to sit and think about it during that time. And it was really, really difficult. And it was pretty miraculous though, because I kept having these little breakthrough moments
Mm-hmm.
throughout the past, however long it's been, 2.5, 2 years. And from where I was then to where I am now, even where I was 2 months ago, is completely different because I'm constantly changing the way that I think and shifting my perspective and allowing myself to feel what I'm feeling rather than running away from it. Because it's easy to think of thoughts that come into your head that trigger you or make you
Mm-hmm.
feel some type of uncomfortable way and just to kind of distract yourself and like let it go, let it pass. But recently and for the past couple of years, I've not been allowing myself to let certain things pass. I've allowed myself to sit with it and to think, why does this trigger me still? How can I work through this? So the old me a couple of years ago would have never been able to process certain things that way. So yeah, emotionally, mentally, I'm just a completely evolved being.
So are you like, are you on any treatments, or is it, tell us more about that, and how does that
Sure.
help, and like how long do you think will that part last in your life,
Mm.
or will there a point come when you'll be like, you know what, I'm strong enough to fight this on my own?
Mm. So I think, so for me, the past couple of years, I was actually on 3 different medications
Mm-hmm.
for anxiety and depression, and it was not helping me. So I have been off of those for like half of a year, maybe like 6 months or so. And I've been in therapy for the past 2 years consistently. And
Mm-hmm.
mind you, throughout this entire process, like since elementary school, I've been in and out of therapy. That has always been something that I've had to utilize, which I'm very thankful for. But consistently, the past 2 years that I've been in therapy, that's been an absolute necessity for me. I think it's just an extra tool that I can add to my toolbox to help me continue to grow. As far as how long I'll be in therapy, I'm not really sure. It's something that I enjoy at this point doing, and I find it still necessary. So I think it's just a
Mm-hmm.
matter of, whatever the situation is and how I'm feeling. And then I was also recently re-diagnosed with ADHD as an adult, in
Mm-hmm.
attempt to go on ADHD medication. So I'm still in the process of all of that. And that was actually very eye-opening as well. Um, so yeah, I just kind of take it one day at a time and utilize the tools that I have, and that's where I'm at.
So I'm just curious to know now, the symptoms of anxiety, depression, and ADHD, are they the same, somewhat similar, or are they a little different?
They're all related.
Oh, okay.
All yeah, so I've learned ADHD, I feel like if you were to think of it like as an umbrella, and I
Mm-hmm.
feel like that is the thing that is constantly in motion, and depending on where my thoughts are at and the external factors, that's when the anxiety, the AD or the depression can come into play. Um, so it really just depends. But yeah, I struggle with all 3, and I think when my depression gets really bad is typically when I feel overwhelmed, which is a
Mm-hmm.
common symptom, if you will, of
Sure.
ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm stressed, or if I have too many tasks on my to-do list, or if, whatever it may be, that kind of kicks in. So it's all kind of just related in the sense of whatever's going on. So
Perfect. So now I want to talk about the wandering mind. I'm really
yeah.
inspired by what you are doing. So tell our audience a little bit about what happened in 2019. How did this idea come to your mind? What was your mission and vision? What you wanted to achieve? I'm asking you a lot of questions related to this, but I want to make sure I don't miss on anything. So please go ahead.
Absolutely. No, yeah. So yes, 2019 was the year that this kind of popped into my head, and it started because I had just ended a 5-year relationship, and I was processing everything and doing some healing and in and out of therapy, on medication, just trying to figure out what was the best, route for me. And at the time, one of the tools I utilized was podcasts. And I had been listening to a very inspirational podcast, and it like just hit me one day. I was sitting there listening to it at work, and I was like, "Oh my god, you know, what if what if I were to do something like this?"
Mm-hmm.
And it initially included 2 other individuals, and we were going to make it more of like a lifestyle podcast where we just talked about all kinds of different issues. And then it kind of just that ended up not happening, and so I was like, well, you know what, if they're not going to be all in with this, then there's still no reason why I can't
Mm-hmm.
do this. So I kind of reevaluated the niche and like where I wanted to go with it. And at that point in time, I was in therapy, and I had just learned so much that year. And so I started the podcast, and the name actually came from a collaboration with a friend who was helping me at the time, like come up with creative things. So we came up with that, and Yeah, there was no planning. I literally just sat with my iPhone one afternoon and was like, okay, here we go, and recorded it. And that was that.
So
The mission of it.
how
Oh,
yeah, go
go
ahead.
ahead. I'm
Please
sorry.
go ahead. No, please. Curious to know the mission.
Yes. So the mission is to normalize and destigmatize speaking up about mental health, because again, for so long throughout my journey in particular, and I know so many other people feel this way, you don't feel comfortable enough to speak up about this, about what you're struggling with, because of, whatever it may be, fear of judgment, fear of isolation, being rejected, being judged, all kinds of stuff. So it was a huge burden for so long that I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was. And I couldn't explain it because I didn't want people to think I was crazy. And so finally, going through this and getting to a place where I finally could talk about it openly, it was so freeing. And I was like, wow, like if I had a podcast where someone would just openly talk about the things that they were going through, honestly, I would have felt so much better. I would
Mm-hmm.
have felt so much less alone. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do it, was just create a community and start those conversations that some people are, too scared to have, or find themselves too uncomfortable to speak up about, and let people know that it's okay. It's okay to talk about what you're actually going through and how you're feeling, because we're all human beings and we all go through shit, and everyone's normal, if you
Mm-hmm.
will. Like we
Yeah.
all have something. So that's what it's turned into, is bringing on incredible humans to talk about the shit that they've gone through and how they've overcome, and provide comfort and advice and encouragement, and just normalize talking about it.
So how has been the perception of your podcast so far?
The perception has been great so far. I mean, we're 2 years in and there's still a lot to learn and a lot to do. But so far, I mean, even like I don't even allow myself really to think about like how far like we've come with this. It's kind of crazy to reflect on, but we've had so many incredible guests on the show, and God, like hearing these people speak about the things that they've gone through, though it breaks my heart because I hate hearing that people have had to
Right.
suffer. But my God, I'm just like, every time I'm like, me too, or I understand, or like, I get that to some degree, like I can empathize with you. And it just further emphasizes, just by having one single conversation, it can change someone's entire perspective and then make them feel comforted with, is just kind of mind blowing. It's very powerful. So it's been really great. It's been a very, very wonderful experience.
Did it surpass your own expectations?
I think I did, because going into it, I really didn't have any. I didn't. It was just kind of on a whim thing, the ADHD there for you. Like I didn't plan anything. I was just like, okay, let's just do this. So yeah, absolutely. And I'm just excited to see where we can continue to go with it.
Do you have any goal in mind where you want your podcast to be in the next 3 to 5 years? Or
Ooh. Um, I don't really know. I hope it continues to grow. I just want to reach more people, and have more awesome folks on the show. Ideally, I would love to do this full time. So if ever an opportunity within the 35 years arose where I could do that, that I feel would be huge, because then I could actually pour everything, every single thing into it. As where now I'm working a full-time job. I'm also trying to do the podcast while maintaining a social life. And I'm planning a mental health festival here in Louisville. So there's just a lot of moving pieces. So that would be a huge thing that hopefully one day will happen.
hopefully. So tell our audience, is it available on Apple, Spotify? Go ahead, please.
Yep, it's on every single streaming platform you can name. It's there. Apple
Okay,
and Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google, all the things. Yeah.
perfect. I want to talk about Mindfest Louisville. You just mentioned as well.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, what is that concept, and how different is that to the podcast, and what's the purpose of that?
Mindfest is a mental health festival that
Mm-hmm.
myself and a team of other amazing individuals have been working on for the past year, and we're bringing it to our downtown. And this is to emphasize the mission of normalizing mental health while also bringing accessible resources to those who may not have access to them. So we're going to have all kinds of mental health and wellness vendors set up there with information and ways to engage with the community. We're going to have DJs and food trucks and activities for kids and families and adults all day. And then we're going to have a panel discussion. So there's like, I think 7 people or so. They're going to just kind of sit and engage with an audience and talk about mental health. It's going to be an amazing event. I honestly can't believe it's happening, because
And will this be the first time? Will be the first year?
The first year.
And when is it happening? What are the dates?
It's May 21st. And it's happening in Louisville, Kentucky at Roots 101 African American Museum. So we're also bringing Black culture into the mix as well, which is a huge thing that we all stand for and support. So yeah, it's happening.
Wow, that's pretty big though. So let me ask you now, these vendors that are coming, so I'm sure that over the past couple of years, you must have tried to build a lot of good relations with these vendors. Give us the background a little bit about, the collaboration with the vendors and all that. How does that come around?
Absolutely. So actually the vendors, so the team that I've built through the podcast, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. So one individual, actually there's 2 mental health professionals here in Louisville. I connected with one about 2 years ago, 3 years ago, actually. Right as I was starting the Wondering Mind podcast, we connected, and she is like the mental health hub, if you will, here in Louisville. And she's also a therapist. She knew tons of people, and she connected me to a couple other folks who then came on my show, and then I pitched this idea. So honestly, it was through this group of individuals that helped us gather all of these vendors and bring this idea to life and put it out there into the community, because they've been doing some really hard work for however long, for quite a while in their professions and networking with all these people. So they were able to assist me with that, quite honestly. But yeah,
so is this something you will be doing every year, once a year? And what's the purpose? Like, I'm sure when you started working with these other individuals, you must have a goal in mind. What's that?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, we intend for it to be annual. It'll be at different locations every year because we're hoping that it grows. But the intention again is just to normalize speaking up about mental health, bringing a community together around mental health, which here in Louisville has never really been done, and allowing the community to have a fun and safe space to learn about mental health and just engage with one another. I think that's all we can really ask for and bring our community together, because Louisville, Kentucky especially has been through quite a bit over the past few years. So it's kind of also just a healing event as well, letting people kind of heal and learn and grow with each other.
Very interesting. I'm actually very excited for this. And then do people buy tickets? How does the attendance work?
So this year it's free. No, you can just come, and I think it's from like 10 to 6:30. There's activities throughout the day.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's an all-day event. Yeah, we have a website. It's www.mindfestlou.com. There's more information about I can't talk about the festival there. You can donate, you can sign up to volunteer. Yeah, it's a free event this year.
That's awesome. I have a couple of other questions before we wrap this up now.
Sure.
Like, depression to me is a state of being. What does that mean to you? What does the word depression mean to you?
It means a lot of things to me, actually. I feel like you're onto something when you say it's a state of like of being. I feel like for me personally, I can't speak for anyone else, but when I'm depressed, I feel like it's my body trying to tell me something. Similarly, as when I'm anxious, my body is trying to tell me something. I think that it's easier for some people to come out of depressive episodes than others. And everyone is so different. It takes everyone a different amount of time, different ways to navigate through. But depression is complicated because some people can navigate through and others can't. So it's really just a person by person basis. But for me, yeah, I would say it's a state of being. It's something my body's trying to tell me something, like, what am I neglecting? What am I not doing that's making me feel this way? Or yeah. So it's complicated though.
Okay, that's the right way to put it. It's complicated.
It is.
Last but not the least,
Mhm.
tell us more about your support system. What's the biggest strength you have had from others, or give us the best support system you've got over the period of years that has helped you overcome this major hurdle in your life and is still helping you.
I would say my parents,
Mm-hmm.
because typically whenever I am struggling or going through something, I am not one to reach out to friends. I am typically the type of person to isolate and seclude myself for fear of being a burden, which is a very, very, very common thing that a lot of people can relate to. So I have done a lot of inner work myself and relied on myself quite a bit, but I would have to say that my parents have been through a lot with me, and our relationship has definitely grown and evolved because of their support and because of their love and their non-judgments and being there for me in times of need. So yeah, I'm very, very lucky to say that I have two parents and a sister as well
Mm-hmm.
who is very open with me and allows me to have that space to vent, to talk, to cry when I need to.
Listen, I'm truly inspired by your story, and especially your the foundation of your podcast, doing this festival. I mean, you know, uh, your inspiration is really inspiring. Uh,
Thank you.
so as a closing statement from your end, if there was a message you wanted to give our audience, take away, please go ahead.
Oh, wow. Advice. Lately, I've been kind of preaching or trying to state, don't hide from your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really hard thing to try not to do, is to it's easier to run away from the things that you're feeling. And I've done that for so long, and I finally chose to stop running, and it
Mm-hmm.
was monumental in my growth. So for anyone that might be struggling or going through something or have past trauma that they kind of just refuse to revisit, in regards to your healing process, I can't stress enough how important it is to just feel your feelings and stop running from your emotions, and to find that support system, reach out for help, because you're not a burden. No matter what your brain is trying to tell you, you're not a burden. I think people would rather understand where you're coming from and have that
Mm-hmm.
transparent and hard conversation than you not be here to have that at all. So that's my sense, my two
That's
cents.
awesome. It's funny. I was just watching. I think it would be a good podcast for you to also watch. It's the Joe Rogan Experience, the new podcast he did with Sadhguru, and it was just released a couple of days ago. And the guy, this Sadhguru, who is one of the most influential people in India, he talks about
Mhm.
this spirituality and about human beings, and it is very interesting. And I, if you ever get a chance, listen to it, and maybe, I don't know, it's just a different perception of how, as you said, we all are human beings, we all are the same, we all go through stuff, so the
Mhm.
same way he has tried to put it in a very spiritual manner. So
Interesting.
I just wanted to
Yeah.
share that with you.
Thank you.
Well, Emily, I want to thank you so much. This has been really informative. I'm glad we were able to do this. We've been trying for a long time, and you know, I want to wish you all the very best. We are here for you all the time, anytime. And if there is something we can do for you, please feel free to reach out to us. And once again, grateful to you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you. This was a wonderful opportunity, and I had a fun time chatting with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Emily. You have a great day. Bye
You too. Bye.
bye.